Okay, we're going to get started. Let me put these on. And want to welcome Matt and thank Matt for coming in. He drove in here. We're doing this at Lily's today. He drove in instead of me having to drive out to the country, so I really appreciate that.
No problem.
I want to make sure that we're making it about just more of a conversation than really having to do like a question and you answer my question and stuff like that, because I think that things get lost in context a lot of times, or get lost in just trying to hit answering points rather than actually having a conversation about our community. I think that you and Chase have ran clean races. There's definitely differences on what y'all feel and think and your opinions, but I think that y'all have been very courteous to each other on that. And I think that that's very respectful within the community and respectful to your constituents to be able to do that, and people not have to worry about trash that comes in, you know what I mean? And they can just focus on what your points are and focus on who you are as a potential commissioner, who he is as a commissioner. And I appreciate that. So I kind of want to just start off by saying the number one thing that when I talk about somebody and what commissioners do or what they want from their commissioners is how the roads are. I think no matter the best way that you can do it, you're always going to have a road complaint. And so the county is responsible, or the county budget is also a responsibility of the commissioners. What is your take on improving departmental budgets, but also your own budget? And how much of that do you feel needs to be focused on the roads? Do you think that right now it's being taken care of? Do you think that financially there's funding, properly funded? Where do you feel about that?
Well, I guess the first thing I'd like to say is that our duty, I believe, is to stay as close to the effective tax rate as possible. We're currently just a little bit above the effective tax rate. I mean, we're fairly close, but probably not as close as we could be. If the money is not getting spent, so I can look at the budget here, and so we are taxing the citizens. Employee wages. Let me get to the right line here. Road materials. We are taxing the citizens $225,000 for road material in Precinct 4.
Right.
So we have spent last tax at the end of the 24-25 fiscal year. We had spent $180,000 of that. If we're taxing for something for a service, and we're not fully providing what we have, if we're not using what we have, then we're doing the taxpayer a disservice.
Okay.
It's my belief. Because the Texas state says, it's part of the law is that we have to provide those services.
Right.
And I don't think we're fully providing those services. And I think that people who drive our roads in Precinct 4, I think they can see that. Oh yeah, they're not in. I don't think they're as in good a shape now as they were 8 years ago.
Okay.
They've deteriorated quite
so let
a
me
bit.
ask you kind of this, to kind of piggyback off of that a little bit. I know that we've had some damage done to our roads and stuff because of just natural disaster kind of thing. We have FEMA coming in. I'm not educated enough, and I'm not expecting, whether you are or not, I'm not assuming anything. But when we have that FEMA money coming in, so we're already budgeted for a certain thing for the year, right? So then when you have a situation like that to where it is focused on the roads and that money comes in, does that help kind of take care of that? And then should we be doing that on top of it? Is this just to kind of Band-Aid things, and then you think we're supposed to be taking care of it with ours? How does that work if you know?
This $225,000 is budgeted for maintenance of the roads.
Right.
That FEMA money is used for repairs caused by natural disasters.
Right.
So that's a totally separate deal.
Right.
When that FEMA money comes in, it should be used to fix road washouts, tin horns that have washed out, not rotted out, but washed out. The biggest issue Precinct 4 faces right now is our manpower situation.
Okay.
We have one full-time employee, and he runs a blade. Precinct 4 has 3 maintainers, 3 blades, and we have 1 guy to run them full time. We have 1 part-time guy to run a blade. So that means there's a blade sitting there idle.
Right.
52 weeks out of the year.
Right.
The opposite side of that is we have 2 haul trucks, 2 belly dump rock trucks, and we have, and I'm going to include the commissioner in this because he's a working commissioner. We have 4 truck drivers for 2 trucks.
Right.
Part-time, but still, the days that they're all there, there's a personnel management issue there.
Okay.
And then there's days that it's just the 1 full-time employee there.
Right.
That's not good personnel management. I think that needs to change. I think we need to do what commissioners intended for us to do 20, 30 years ago, and that's to have 4 to 5 full-time employees on those blades, in those rock trucks, every day of the week, every working day of the week. That's the only way we can keep our roads maintained fully. We have 227 miles of road. I know that was disputed a little bit in the hearing. Chase's number comes from a list of roads that's 30 years old. I took that same list that has had there's been a few road closures, not complete road closures, but if the same property owner owns both sides, at the end of a dead-end road, then they're going to close that. They have in the past closed a portion of that road. So that shrunk our road mileage down to 227. I got that number by feeding that into a Excel sheet, list of roads, list of miles for each road, and I came out with 227 and some change.
Which in all honesty, to me, just even listening to that was not a huge one way or the other, but it does factor into, I would think, kind of what you're looking at to budget for and stuff like that.
And it actually affects our budget because our road budget, each commissioner or each precinct's road budget is based on a percentage
of what they have.
Precinct 4 has more roads than any other precinct in the county, so we get a little bit more money.
Right.
It's a percentage thing.
Okay. And so to me too, and just to kind of talk about that, because I know that was one of the differences in the town hall was about the manpower and stuff like that. And I'm playing ignorant on a couple of different things because I don't know.
Devil's advocate.
Right. Well, my deal is I don't know what the workers within the precinct do on a daily basis. So to me, is there enough? Is it something that when we're just talking about, having all of these machines running and going at all times, is there enough that feeds the whole year that you're constantly going to be on these roads? Or is there other things that they do as well? I don't know. And I don't know how many people know.
98, 99% of it is them on the roads. They should be on those roads. Now, there are days, I say 99% because there are days like the freeze we had, a couple of weekends ago or a couple of weeks ago where they're, in the shop doing shop work, and those days are necessary.
Right.
You need those days because that's when you go in and like Chase had mentioned, repair a tire or, change oil or just clean the shop and get the shop in good enough shape that if you have something go wrong, you can pull a piece of equipment in there and work on it immediately. Yeah. One thing that Chase did mention and kind of made me take kind of lean back and work some numbers was he stated that they spent a day, him and his full-time hands spent 1 full day changing out 10 tires. Well, so I'm always interested in kind of like, okay, what's the cost of man hours versus the cost of having farming something out.
Right.
So he took 10 hours to change 10 tires. They spent the whole day in the shop. Is what he said. So they spent $519.60 in man hours in labor. Had he taken those to a tire shop, those same tires, it would have cost $413. Plus, they could have been working on other things.
And I don't know when
and had he taken those down here to Ohana here in Henrietta, he could have brought them down here, set through commissioner's court, stop on his way back and pick a tire. I mean, it's efficiencies that,
Right.
it's just little things that can make you work more efficiently
Right.
than tying up all your
Right.
employees on a project that you could do somewhere else cheaper.
Right. And I don't know the time frame. I did ask about, and this is just on the backside, just a side note. I was talking to him one day about like when the ice stuff did happen, and he said that he didn't have. It was just him and one other guy that came in that day because that guy just happened to be closer, but there was no reason to kind of have. So I don't know if it was a situation like that they were just finding something to do. I'm not going to assume.
Right. And it was. I mean, that's like I said. You have those days where you have.
But overall,
this
is a difference in decision that you probably would have looked into and made.
I might have done that a little differently.
And the interesting thing is that that's one of the things that he talked about too, was being under budget and having that stockpile of stuff, and this is a way to where you're kind of looking at it as, okay, well you're saving money somewhere, but this is a way that you could have saved money in this area as well.
And a lot of that being, I mean, it's good, don't get me wrong, it's good to be under budget, but if you're so far under budget that you're cutting back on services, you're not saving the taxpayer any money that way for two reasons. Number one, that money's already budgeted.
Right.
Those taxes are already paid. So it's not like, I guess a good way to put it is the county is not a banking institution. The county is here to provide services to the taxpayers.
Right.
I felt like a big time politician.
I'm telling you, I noticed it. You did good. You're getting it down.
I did not intend to do that.
You're good.
No, but the county is not a banking institution. Mm-hmm. The county is here to provide services that the taxpayers are paying for.
Right.
And if you are so far under budget that you're turning money back to the general fund, you're not saving that taxpayer any money. You're shorting them on the services you're providing.
Okay.
Like I said, the state constitution outlines our duties, and if those duties are not being met, then we're shorting the taxpayer.
Okay. Well, I think there's a couple of things in here that kind of line up with that.
I would like to add to that, and if you're shorting them on road maintenance, that's going to come back and cost you a lot more money in the future. Because when those roads get to a certain point, you're not talking about maintaining roads, you're talking about rebuilding roads. Right. And that's a lot more expensive than...
And I think that that's an interesting concept because people don't understand. I mean, most of us that live within these, because one, people don't understand that the city roads are not... That's true. It's the county roads that you are maintaining. The city roads are not... That got interesting. But the city roads are not y'all's to maintain. So it's interesting. That's an interesting terminology that you use about rebuilding the roads. Because most people don't even think about stuff like that when they're talking about dirt roads, right? Right. So what do you feel like is a detrimental rebuild situation? I know that there's been a lot of damage in Retta's area, and to where it's washed out the roads completely. Yes. I mean, people can't even drive down certain roads.
And that kind of goes back to that FEMA money. That's what that FEMA
they're waiting
money
on
is
that
there
for sure.
I will say this, a lot of commissioners, especially when they're running, they talk about being a working commissioner. Mm-hmm. Well, for everything that commissioners are required to do, being a working commissioner is part-time at best. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're a part, if they want to be a part-time road hand, I guess that's what they would call a working commissioner. Retta is not that, and I've heard, people say, well, she doesn't do this. I want to tell you what, Retta has come in there, and as a commissioner, she has come to Henrietta, and she has found, 300,000, 350,000, somewhere in that range of grant money that the county hired a full-time grant writer. Mm-hmm. Our Republican chair was the county's grant writer before she was let go and became Republican chair. Retta has found $350,000 more in grant funds than our full-time grant writer did. Mm-hmm. So, there's different aspects to being a commissioner that people don't see, and Retta has really taken on that role of let's find some grant money to get this fixed. Mm-hmm. And like you said, she's having to wait on it, but it will come. Right. And she's done a really good job at that. I mean,
and I think that's an interesting thing, and it goes back to when people are looking for a commissioner, there's strengths and weaknesses to everything. And that's kind of one of these questions that I have in here is what do you feel your strengths are going to be that you're bringing to it? Because you can't, it's apples to oranges sometimes when you're
Yes.
looking at your candidates. I think in precinct 4 you have very similar candidates because both of them, neither one of them really know a whole
Right.
lot about budget side. They
Right.
admittedly don't.
Right.
They know how to work and run machinery and
Right.
stuff like that. So I think no matter what in precinct 4, there's going to be a lot of learning curves that have to be implemented, and these are your choices. And I think that these guys truly want to be dedicated and want to be there and help. There was nobody that felt called to do this, so absolutely great that 2 people stepped up and felt the need to step up. But where that's going to be difficult for them to explain what strengths and weaknesses will be, because there's so much of stuff that goes into budget. But Chase does credit himself to, being a working commissioner, and then also being under budget and being mindful of budget, and he'll say more conservative than most on there.
Right.
What is it that you're going to bring? What is your strengths? But then also, where do you think that your weaknesses might be that you're going to have to focus on? That some things are going to come easy, some things are going to come a little harder, and you're going to have to focus and adjust to that.
I think my strengths are I'm very well rounded. I have a knowledge of roads. I have a knowledge of the equipment, but I also have a knowledge of what goes on in the courthouse. I've been in and around the courthouse for this courthouse for 20 years,
right?
And then also Montague County Courthouse. I covered some courthouse stuff over there when I was working in newspapers. So I have a knowledge of what it takes, what's required as far as budgets. I have a knowledge of effective rate versus the actual rate, and that all comes from my newspaper work, being on the school board, that sort of thing. But I also have a knowledge of the roads. I know how to build a road,
right?
Or I know what a road requires for maintenance. Weaknesses. I think my biggest weakness was sometimes I can get hyper focused on something, whether that be taking an item like reading through laws to see if what I'm thinking is correct.
Right.
Sometimes I can get a little hyper focused on that. That's a bad thing if you get. That can be a bad thing and a good thing. When I'm done, I have an understanding of what that statute, that state law or whatever it is, says and means. But at the same time, I think I can spend a little too much time doing that.
And I can understand that. I mean, I'm obviously hyper focused when I bulldog on something. Sometimes you go down and you go down and you go down, and sometimes it leads you somewhere where, okay, I didn't need all of this, but I needed to focus on this, but now I know all of it, you know what I mean, kind of thing. So I can understand that as well.
And statutes are hard to understand. You kind of have to study on statutes and laws to really get a full understanding of them. So, and that's something I learned when I was in the newspaper business was, if you're going to print it, it better be.
Yeah.
It better be.
And
accurate.
I think that's where it's hard too. Sometimes I think as a small community. And small time politicians as well. I've watched it kind of with the hospital board some, and watched it even in commissioner's court and stuff, where we kind of get laxed a little bit on, because everybody knows each other, everybody's comfortable with everything. So we go in and we kind of get laxed even in commissioner's court sometimes of not necessarily following all procedural things and stuff.
Yes.
But I think the problem becomes is that when there is something that arises, that's the first thing that everybody goes after is, well, if you would have only followed this, then it would have covered you on something. And so I think that that's very important that we stick to things like that. So no matter how bad it can seem.
I think that one of the hardest issues, or one of the problematic issues that commissioners face, is of what you're saying, being too comfortable with each other is, and I'm not saying being comfortable with them is a bad thing, but being too comfortable is, when I don't know if you've ever paid attention to how the commissioner's offices are laid out.
I've never even been in.
Okay,
so I don't know.
So when that building was built, when the annex was built, all 4 commissioners shared an office. Recently, I've noticed that one of the commissioners has moved his office, and he's officing with the IT person. So the issue there becomes, if you've got 3 commissioners in one office and they discuss anything business related, they're in a quorum.
Right, and my understanding was
and
too.
that's not legal.
Right, and my understanding too is a concern is I didn't even know they could be in the same place at the same time. Like it's kind of like school board members. They can't all go to the same game or something. Right. Sometimes they have to be mindful of that, so that nobody can accuse them of stop talking about anything and it becoming that way.
I mean, school board. We could all be in the same. We could all be at I don't know. We could all be at a ball game together, right. And as long as we're not grouped up in a bunch, talking.
Well, and I wasn't meaning y'all.
Right.
I know, but Kenny's on the school board, so I kind of watch some ways that she thinks about. Hey, I've got to be careful about not being.
Yes, and I've got that school board kind of same experience. So we can't just sit there and bunch up in the corner and start talking about, hey, we want to do this, we want to do this. We kind of, but I guess in a social setting we could all be together as long as we're not. Yeah. But when you're sitting in an office,
you can be accused too.
Exactly. And when you're sitting in an office, that's not a social setting anymore. That's a business setting.
And it's interesting that they even built it and laid it out that way.
I agree.
Without some sort of separation to kind of speak of.
I agree.
So one of the things, this kind of goes with it too then, is that how do you work with other commissioners when those priorities differ from your own? We've seen a lot of that throughout the past. There are some times when they kind of get together and line up on stuff, but especially with all of the things, and I don't know that it turned personal until there was clear lines drawn a little bit, but how then, one, when you don't agree with someone, and sometimes it's even conflicting morally and, of your own values, but how then do you work with somebody and keep that somewhat composure and not have that animosity feel that we watch sometimes along Commissioner's Court?
Well, as long as Commissioner's Court sticks to the business of the court, we have no agenda items that come up that would have, that somebody could not agree or disagree with on moral reasons. I mean, we're talking about budgets and roads and, structure of the court or structure of the government. We're not talking about the major decisions of the day and, on a federal level,
Yeah.
So, we're not talking about it on county court. We're not talking about illegal immigration. We're not talking about, guns. We're talking about county business.
Right.
And there is nothing in funding. There is nothing in county business that should divide us morally or to the point that we can't. So any other disagreement is just give and take. Okay, well, I can see your point there. Let's, if you can see my point here, let's try to meet in the middle somewhere. It's that simple. And that's a civil way to do it. My big thing is let's bring civility back to county government. Let's quit with the bickering.
Right.
Let's quit with we had guys, when I first kind of came back to Henrietta, I say come back, I was living here, but when I came back to being involved in Henrietta and Clay County with the newspaper and with the Chamber of Commerce and stuff like that, we had 4 guys sitting there on Commissioner's Court that they disagreed on things, but they did it in a way that didn't turn into, I need to call this person up and cuss them out, or I need to chew this person out, or, I need to use this to get back at the, none of that was there then. Right. And that's what I want to say.
Well, and it wasn't as public because, of course, nothing was displayed in the public as well. So that adds a whole other factor, which I'm telling on myself for, I'm taking, my responsibility in that. But
we still had a pretty hard hitting. I mean, we still do, but we had a hard-hitting newspaper then that, we were, and they are now too, I'm not trying to disparage them, but we had guys like Phil Major that they were in that Commissioner's Court every week, and they were in that annex every week, and they were in the courthouse.
Well, and that was the only way to get the information.
That was the only way to get the information at the time. So
there's so many other avenues now that
I wouldn't call it gatekeeping, but there was a lot more, all right, this is what he said, let's double check this fact, triple check this fact, whereas now with Facebook, it's just
out there. So you're just kind of wrapping up what you're, what you kind of watch. Well, and I think that too, a lot of that, from my perspective, started with the hospital board stuff and the miscommunication and misinformation at times with that aspect of it. Then you've got very strong personalities, because at that time even Johnny G was on the board or as a commissioner, and and then Jeff Lyde was very strong personality, and there was so much mistrust between those people that I think it was hard, and that's where I think we're at now. And I'll lead into my next question with that is, I think that's what's so hard, because it created, when you see, and I'm not mentioning these to bring things back up or be negative, but when you see that Maribel has to be removed from office, or resign because she was going to be removed from office for mishandling. When you see Casey Hall, who is a top prosecutor, is the prosecutor within our community, being removed from office. When you see Jeff Lyde being removed from office, in which a lot of people can say and look and think that maybe there was some behind the scenes targeting as well, to where they were having, but obviously there were things there. Well, that creates the mistrust a little bit within our local government, even amongst themselves, but then also the community doesn't trust what they're seeing and stuff like that. And so how do you think that we get to the point of bringing that trust back? Because everybody talks about transparency, but in all honesty, there's things you can't be just telling everybody. As commissioners, you have to discuss it behind closed doors. It can't all be open.
Well, I will say this about closed door meetings, about the special the executive sessions. Used to, it was very rare for Clay County to have an executive session in Commissioner's Court, and now it's every time they meet. Is that executive session being abused? I don't know, because
we don't know what they're talking about. Right.
Exactly. But I think that executive sessions are very easy to abuse. School boards executive sessions are more common because you're dealing with teachers and children and people who you can't, so you have to have more executive sessions in a situation like that. But executive sessions would be and are very easy to abuse. You have to be really careful in executive session about to make sure you stay on topic, So I can't really speak to the county, but I do know that we have a lot more executive sessions than we used to. As far as
and do you think that as a commissioner that you could have a voice or even change that? Because if somebody's wanting to put on the agenda to go into executive session about something, is there a way to combat that, or even have conversations where this really needs to be in the public or presented? The
rules on what can be brought up in executive session are very strict.
Right.
As long as you stick to those rules, you're going to be okay.
Right.
As far as the other part of your question about people who have, been forced to leave office or so on.
And we don't have to address those. I'm just meaning it's created, whether meant to be or not, it's created a little bit of distrust. So trying to bring that trust. I don't want to tie anybody up to putting their opinions out on any of that.
No,
but,
I'm not going to speak to any of that specifically, any of those individuals specifically. But I will say, what I want to say is, as long as the Commissioner's Court only handles their part of it and doesn't say, okay, well, I'm pretty sure this person's guilty or not guilty or whatever, and allow because that's a legal issue.
Right.
That's a legal issue. That's a criminal issue.
Right.
So that needs to be left to a criminal investigator to decide what, and allow it to move on from there. We've got a very good sheriff's department, and we've got a very good DA's office right now. I feel like that's my opinion, and then we've got the rangers and troopers, and we've got enough law enforcement to handle our legal issues, our criminal issues. It's not up to the Commissioner's Court to do that. Right. It's not up to any elected county official to do that except the sheriff. Right.
So another aspect of that then is watching them going into executive sessions. A lot of times they're talking to TAC attorneys and things like that. I don't know the protocol for stuff, but in the past I've watched where they were advised by Seth in a lot of different ways as the county attorney. I've watched where, when the school board stuff was going on, the hospital board stuff was going on, Seth was on the board at one moment. Yeah. So where they brought in Frank Douthit, to kind of advise a little bit on some things as well. Do you think, what do you feel like the role of even the county attorney should be in advising. And then do you feel at this point we're not utilizing that and we're utilizing TAC more? Is there a reason that you see that that's happening? Or do you feel like that that's just kind of a normal
I think
avenue?
that the county attorney and TAC serve two different purposes. TAC is more for legal issues that the commissioners or an elected official themselves, as an individual may face. So I think that and consultation with an attorney is one of the items that is covered, under executive session. So I think that as far as TAC and Seth Slagle are concerned, I think they're probably doing that.
Doing everything seems good.
Yes.
I just because we notice different things and stuff like that. So let me kind of look here and see. So here's another. I'll try to kind of do a few more and then we'll kind of wrap up a little bit because I don't want to take too much of your time. And I think hopefully you feel like it's going pretty good and everything's good. But Clay County collects taxes from residents living within the city limits of towns like Petrolia, Byers, Bellevue, Henrietta. Given their tax contributions, do you feel these citizens should receive an equal level of county provided services? If so, how do you propose to accomplish that? And I don't even know right now if it is equal. I know that you kind of talked about how depending on the amount of in your precinct, the roads and things like that, you're budgeted kind of that way. But does it matter or deter things or diminish things if like Henrietta's paying more money in taxes than Petrolia obviously would or something? How do you feel?
No, the precincts are broken up population-wise as evenly as possible. In fact, there are every 10 years when they do the census, there will be a slight change to the precinct, and it's usually within Henrietta where it'll be. It'll move up one road or it'll move down one road. So really, the only thing that rural residents receive that city residents don't would be roads. I mean, otherwise it's there goes a fire truck. I don't know if we have a grass fire somewhere.
Oh goodness! And we've had rain. So.
So the big issue, or I guess that would be the biggest difference. What city residents receive from the county is the things that people don't often realize that they're, well, the sheriff's department would be the biggest one. I mean, that would be the most obvious one or the most, easiest to observe. But also, your tax or your tag office, the tax assessor collector where you get your car tags. That's funded by the county. County clerk handles all your deed records. No matter if you're out in the country or in the city. The DA's office. They get every service that a rural resident gets, with the exception of road maintenance.
Okay,
so
that's good.
And that's because the city maintains their roads.
Absolutely.
With the exception of Bellevue, Precinct 4 does have an interlocal agreement with Bellevue too, because Bellevue has gravel roads, so we do blade their roads.
Okay, good to know too. So also, what do you think is the biggest problem that Clay County's either facing now or going to be facing soon? And if elected, what steps would you take to combat this problem?
So, other than the political wranglings dynamics that we're in right now, which I'd like to address that too, but I don't want to get into the details of it. But let me answer your first question there first. So I think the biggest issue that we are facing right now, I say right now, the biggest issue that we're going to face is going to be growth. We are on the verge, I'm afraid, of some major growth. I was told 30 years ago that growth in Clay County won't come from the west. People always think, Wichita Falls is working their way this direction. It's not going to come from the west. It's going to come from the Metroplex. We're already seeing that. Wise County, Montague County, we're next on the list. There's going to be growing pains, and that's something that we need to be proactive about. And I'm not talking about proactive like, hey, we need to blade this road because it's supposed to rain tomorrow and we won't be able to. That's short-term proactive. I'm talking about long-term. I'm talking about 20 years, 30 years. One thing we did on Bellevue ISD did recently is we approved the purchase of a couple of acres on the it'd be the southwest corner of our campus where a house used to sit there. So we're kind of next to where our new baseball field is. The rumor kind of got around that we wanted to start football, and we were going to build a football stadium there, and that's why we bought it. That's not true. The reason we bought that is because our campus was landlocked,
Right.
and when we start seeing some major growth in Bellevue, 20, 30 years down the road, we wanted the acreage to already be in place in
Right.
case we have to build a building.
Put some kids in.
And it's a lot cheaper to buy that land now
Right.
than it will be 30 years from now. So we wanted to get our hands on that so we would be prepared for future growth. And I think that's what our county needs to do as well. I'm not talking about going out and buying a bunch of land, but we need to keep our roads in shape. We need to, we're seeing more traffic already up and down our county roads. And not just from cars, but from delivery trucks, Amazon,
Absolutely.
UPS, FedEx. And
get you a post office box now. I'm just kidding.
and those trucks are hard on roads, and so we need to be
even
prepared.
Dumpsters and trash trucks, because I know the servicing,
trash
trucks, all of that stuff.
And not just that, but water. We need to start thinking about what's our water situation going to be in 30
And that's what I was going to ask.
We had and the sale fell through, but there was 1,000 acres south of Bellevue that a development company was looking at purchasing, and they were going to build 100 homes on 10-acre lots.
Yeah.
Well, that's 100 water wells.
Yes.
That's 100 septic tanks.
Well, and Dean is facing that now.
Dean's facing that right now.
And Petroleum is talking about, they had somebody coming in and talking, and if they would be able to supply the water to people. And I think that is a huge thing, especially because where does our water come from?
That's the kind of proactive. When I say I want a proactive county government, that's the kind of proactive I'm talking about.
So what do you see that you need, steps that need to be made for that, for things like that? Until you get in, sometimes it's hard to look at that.
That is something that we are going to have to sit down and consider, because there's not. We can't, as a county, as a commissioner's court. I'm a big believer in property rights too. So you're running into you have two ideals that clash. Can we control how many wells people drill on a property, or how close those wells can be together? Or is that their right as a landowner to say, hey, I want to punch a hole every 5 feet? You can't do that, because, Clay County groundwater in Clay County. Now we're a little bit better around Bellevue. We've got good groundwater around Bellevue for the most part. We're in the Trinity Sands Aquifer. A lot of our wells are in the Trinity Sands Aquifer, but that Trinity Sands Aquifer, that's Montague County, Wise County, Tarrant, that's already getting hit hard. But in other parts of Clay County, there's not any groundwater. It's very spotty, So
I think they have to bring like a witch doctor out.
There's going to be some very hard decisions that have to be made in the future. Do we try to talk somebody into developing a water conservation? Kenneth Liggett 30 years ago was trying to push a water conservation district and just couldn't get anybody interested, because there's that whole concept that Kenneth's a smart guy. But, he got pushback because there's that, well, it's my property, I'm going to put a well where I want. Well, that's true, but 30 years ago, we weren't facing the growth that we're going to be facing in the next 30 years. So where do you draw that line? How much input can you have on that? Those are going to be some hard decisions.
Well, and here's one of the things, too, that that some of these questions came from, I've reached out to other, areas, other counties that have done some town halls, and wanted some questions just so it wasn't directly here and nothing felt targeted or anything. So one of the things that in Archer County that was sent to me was that the primary purpose of building permits and stuff is to ensure public safety, legal compliance by verifying construction projects and meet local building codes, zoning laws, and safety standards. I don't know how much I talked to a commissioner one day about, it was actually my commissioner, Ben, about, concern with, because I live out in Hearnville area, and that's where they were talking about, Petroleum started talking about these possibly 250 homes or something going out in that area.
Right.
And so I'm like, one, what does that look like? And he started talking to me about some of the permits that they would have to get and how difficult sometimes it is to even get those or qualify for permits or whatever. So how do you feel about that? Do you think that we're too strict on some? I don't know if you know a whole lot about that side of it. I know nothing. So I'm just kind of trying to learn where I can. But how do you feel about permits? Should we be more lenient to be able to bring businesses in, or do we stay strict to where we can still have some sort of a small community? You know what I mean? I think that there's a catch-22 on some of it.
There very much is. The last several years when I was working in the oil field, I was in that kind of Sunset in Montague County on towards Decatur area, and that that's growing so fast, and they're those houses are a little more spread out. They're not just packed in there, and they're expensive houses. I mean, they're $400,000-$500,000 houses, and that's great for your tax base.
Yeah.
But at the same time, how much of that country feel are you losing? I mean, and for agricultural production too, you're losing a lot of ag production because of that, and that's part of our tax base as well.
Yes.
This county is founded on agriculture,
people's livelihoods.
Yes. There's like I said, there's some big decisions to be made there, and as far as the permitting part of it, I feel like permits have a place, but that's, like I said, that's one of those hard questions that we're going to have to ask.
And you look at kind of as it comes along, right?
Yes.
I don't think it's something you can make a decision on futuristically because you don't know that you're not going to have to alter and make changes sometimes.
Right, but like I say, that's one of those proactive type deals. Like you have to kind of talk to people and say, look, I know this looks strict, but here's why we're doing it.
Right.
We're doing it to try to protect our groundwater, try to protect our, septic, because you can't have too many.
And try to protect our values that we want within our community, because we know that the outside world, outside of our bubble, there's so many, and I don't want to get into some of those things, but there's so many different ideologies going on that at least I feel like we're all in this small town because we all kind of have that same need and want and desire for ourselves, for our children and stuff like that. And so, when you start bringing in and things, it's kind of like people talk about, people from California moving to Texas, don't California my Texas thing,
exactly.
And so it's kind of like, don't outside world affect Clay County, because we still want to this is why we stayed, right? This is why we stayed here, moved our families here, and came back. So one of the things too that kind of goes with that when we're talking about property and stuff like that, I reached out to a commissioner or a former commissioner in Wichita for some questions too, just again to get some feedback. And one of the things he brought up was, if Florida does a ban on property taxes this year, Texas will likely follow suit in some fashion. If Texas did that, how would you resolve the issue of revenue shortfall? That is a huge thing that I've been watching, and that a lot of people, we already had it on the ballot on some aspect of things.
Yes.
And where does our revenue completely come from?
That's that.
And so what are we looking at with that?
So, property taxes, I do not like property taxes, and nobody does. But, and we hear a lot of rhetoric from our state politicians about property taxes. Funny thing is your state, senator and your state representative will sit up there and say, well, these schools and these cities and these counties, they're ripping y'all off on property taxes. But it's the state that comes in and says, here's how much you can charge. Here's how much you can. Here's how much you can, here's what taxes you can take from people. Here's your minimum and here's your maximum. You got to be so it's the state that's saying here's what you can tax,
but
they'll
else.
Set up there and blame somebody else. Exactly.
Not us.
That the property tax deal. Like I said, I don't like property taxes. Nobody does, but until we have a better system, that's what we have, and we have to fund these things. We have to fund roads. We have to fund, school districts. We have to fund cities. The biggest thing like I said, they haven't given us a good solution, on the property tax
Right.
deal. They'll say, and what they have said is, you can use sales tax instead.
Right.
Okay, what's Midway ISD going to do for sales tax?
Absolutely.
What's Bellevue ISD? Bellevue ISD has one store in it.
Right.
What are we going to do for
So
sales tax?
does that turn around and be dispersed county-wise instead of staying in the city? Is there ideas of that? And then who can delegate and regulate that? Because you have to get agreement.
True, but the way our sales tax is set up is, the sales tax in Henrietta, for example, is 8.25%. Mm-hmm. The state gets 6% of that. The city gets 2%. The city's just barely meeting their budget. Right. Bellevue's just barely meeting their budget. So where's the leftover for the county? They would have to install an additional sales tax, which would increase our sales tax,
which is some of what they're talking about.
14%.
Which is some of what they talk about on a national level. If we did away with property tax, then that's what would have to happen, which might not be a bad thing, but it just depends, because you've got a majority of people anymore that are renters rather than homeowners, and you also that affects them too.
Right, and you also get there's we learned that. I remember in high school we learned this in civics class.
Who was your teacher? Shout out.
Coach.
Can you remember?
Yes, I can remember. I can't remember. I can't spit his name out right now. He was the girls' basketball coach, and he took the girls to the regional finals. Yes.
Stiles. No?
Yes, Mark Stiles.
Yeah, there you go. Is that who it was?
It was Mark Stiles.
Or was it?
Yes.
Okay.
He was a good teacher.
Yeah.
In fact,
sorry, just shouting out.
Anyway. He actually applied for the girls' coaching job at Bellevue when we hired our new coach, and then I think he backed out for some reason. Anyway, he's retired, but he was going to be a retiree hire. But I love Coach Stiles. He was a great teacher. Anyway, back to the point.
Sorry.
That's okay. So there's that. So when you're looking at sales tax versus property tax, there's two things to look at: sales tax versus property tax. Sales tax tends to affect, now this is on kind of a higher moral standing, I guess, depending on where your political beliefs are at. Sales tax, they will tell you, affects people of a lower income harder than property tax.
Right.
However, property tax affects the landowner a lot harder than sales tax does. Right. That's just kind of an off-topic deal that I remember from way back when. But as far as sales tax, the way that would work is the sales tax would go to the state, and it's just like how the city operates. The state collects the full 8.25% and then distributes the 2% back to the city. So the state would collect the sales tax and then distribute it, part of it, back to the county. Is how that would probably work. We know that from history. But I'm a small government guy, and my belief is that small government means local government.
Right.
So
the more we can keep control.
Exactly. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
yes.
Sorry.
Small government means local government. Mm-hmm. If your local government's strong, you don't have as much need to rely on the state. The less you can rely on the state, the better. So with property tax, it goes to us. Mm-hmm. It's controlled by us. Mm-hmm. And we see it go from the taxpayer directly to our county government.
And then dispersed
out versus having that middleman.
Right.
That we would have with the state. Who's going to take their little cut.
Yes, their cut.
Yes.
Of having to know you back your check, right?
Yes,
something like that. Having to process it.
So that's going to be a complicated deal.
So what do you feel like, and we'll kind of wrap it up with this a little bit, and then I'm going to give you a minute to just say anything that you would like to say, but what do you feel like that we need to be investing in, that we need to be looking into for revenue? How do we get there? What does that look like for you in the next 4 years? And what do you think, and this is kind of a all-in question, hopefully it'll wrap things up for you, but what do you think that when you look back in 4 years, you hope that you've accomplished? It's kind of a loaded question.
So revenue-wise, I talked about effective rate versus actual rate. I don't think that we should ever have to raise taxes. And part of that goes back to the growth that we're expecting to see. Property values have skyrocketed over the last 20 years. When Sasha and I got married in 2003, we bought a house over here on North Archer Street, little 2-bedroom house. We paid $34,000 for it. That was 22 years ago, almost 23 years ago. We bought it right before we got married. We didn't move in together. It needed some renovations, so we did some work to it and then moved into it. We sold that house 6 years later, I believe. No, it was almost 10 years later. We sold it for $55,000. So we'd added a bedroom onto it, sold it for $55,000. The next time that house has sold several times since. The next time it sold for $85,000. The last time it sold for $135,000. Wow. In 20 years, it gained $100,000 value. So yeah, people see on their tax bill, they say, well, my property is way overpriced. But if you look at the market, it's following the market. The market's just exploded in the last 20 years.
Well, especially COVID time, it seems like during
COVID,
it exploded, and I don't know if it was because people were moving here from other country states and were willing to spend so much more money.
Right. Well, when you're selling a place in Wise County, and you move to here, you're selling that place. You think you're getting a deal. Yeah. But our effective rate versus our rate should not have to change because our property values are growing. Right. So when your property values are growing, you're drawing more, tax revenue off of the property values and not the rate. And as we see growth, two things are going to happen. We'll see our property values continue to increase, which means our tax revenues will continue to increase. But you're also going to see people expect more for their tax dollars. One of the things I've talked to some commissioners too. I talked to the commissioner of Precinct 1 and kind of got, because Wichita County Precinct 1, because that's where I got my start in the county when I was a high school kid. So I know those roads up there, and I know all of their roads are chip sealed. And I think that at some point in time, now I'm not saying this is going to happen if I'm elected, first year. This is probably 20 years down the road. But you have to kind of understand what people are going to start expecting, and people are going to start expecting to see chip seal roads. If they're building a $300,000 house or a $500,000 house, they don't want the inside of that house coated in dust every day. Right. There's going to be some things that people will expect for their money, and how we go about doing that, that's going to include some changes from the way we've been operating for 50 years to the way we operate. Just evolve. We have to evolve. We have to. It's evolution. It's evolution. That's exactly what it is. Now, chip seal has its benefits. It's very expensive up front. Your upfront cost is expensive, but the long-term cost of it is actually less because it doesn't take as much to maintain. Right.
So, what do you feel like if you're elected that 4 years, if we're sitting here later?
But let me be clear, I am not going to chip seal all the roads.
No, I think that's very clear. I think you're talking about things
I don't want people to take that the wrong way. That's 30 years down the road.
I just think that there's things that, of course, you're going to have to look into. And I think it's conversations that have to be had, and you're not going to be able to lock in until it is time. So I completely get that. But what do you think if we're sitting here 4 years later and you look back, if you were elected and you look back at your 4 years, what do you hope that are your accomplishments? What do you hope that the changes have been made that you can stand and be proud of for your position?
I would like to not see the county on the national news. Right. That would be number one. I'd like to go 4 years without the county being in the national news.
Even in the news would be nice, like negatively.
Right.
I'll have to shut down my page.
But as far as I would like to see smooth roads. I would like to see roads that have a crown on them instead of two ruts down the middle, which some of our roads currently have. I would like to see a workforce that feels like they are taken care of. I would like to see guys that are working for the county as a career and not just as a part-time gig to fill the space between, hey, I lost this job,
Yeah.
the next job. I'm just filling the space between two jobs, two
Right.
careers. I want to see county hands that feel like they are taken care of and have a career and have a life here in Clay County.
Okay. So I'm gonna let you go on whatever you kind of want to leave a messaging from this experience. Hopefully, you feel like we've gotten a lot of information out there. Hopefully, you feel like you've gotten a voice and had your time to speak. I hope that we've done that today, because I just feel like that there's so many times that people can come and ask questions, but they don't take the time to have conversations.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that that's what we do in all of these. But I just want you to have an opportunity to speak on anything that you think needs to speak on, and kind of wrap it up and end it however you feel comfortable.
So one of the things that I guess is going on right now, immediate things, is the wind farm. The Shannon Wind Farm has recently declared bankruptcy, so that's a loss of a little over $1 million to the county. That's something that we should have been prepared for. Wind farms are not exactly stable, and it hasn't been because the wind farm was losing money per se. It all goes back to the big winter storm we had. What was it? What year was that? Gosh, 2022, I think it was. Anyway, that big winter storm that we had the rolling blackouts and all that. That's what that all goes back to. So we should have had the time to prepare for that. We have had the time to prepare for it. We knew that at some point that payment in lieu of taxes is what we're losing. That payment in lieu of taxes was going to come to an end. We should have been prepared for that, and I think for the most part we probably were. I don't ever want any funding that we lose to be used as fear mongering. And I'm not saying it has been used as fear mongering, but that's something that can be overcome.
Right.
And as our property values increase,